Yeah! Hi, seekers of truth. This is the Weird Christian. And today I'm going to be talking about, some of my favorite talk is basically about the Genesis, but, talking about the Bible and people reading ancient literature in itself and how they understand it. And at the end, I'll be talking about what I really think the two trees are about in the garden, which is totally different than everybody else. I don't know why, but anyway. To me, it's the way it's playing, but anyway. Okay, so people will be surprised how their interpretation of words can blind them to the message the writer attempts to convey. This is especially true for readers of ancient documents. And here's an ancient document in cuneiform, some Sumerian text. And the less, and this is especially true for readers of ancient documents like this one, the less that is known about the people of that time and culture, the easier it is to interpret words and messages from the reader's perspective without being constricted by the writer's intent of message. So, though a lot of people actually do try to learn, but a lot of people just like to project their ideas into ancient literature. An object study of the myriads of books analyzed messages of the Bible would validate this. This is because people do not attempt to be consistent with Bible themes. Instead, many try to sell themselves or their books using popular fads. This is especially true of future events. And we have people talk about ancient aliens. They look at some pictures or writings from ancient times, and of course they project their ideas into them. And this is very much what happens all the time. Though, ancient cultures, they believed in gods and so forth, and beings beyond them. But as far as believing in, spacecraft and things like that, I guess they could have sort of. But anyway, I think though a lot of times we project our own culture, ray guns and Star Trek and so forth into the cultures of the ancients. In addition to people doing this for ancient past or future events, in attempts to sell the Bible, in addition to people's attempt to use the Bible to sell speculative prophetic fiction, the Bible has repelled authoritarians to use it to establish control over others. And some people might not think that this is a kind of a blurry picture of Augustine of Hippo, a picture that is supposed to be of him. But, many people would not think Augustine as a control freak. But if you read, like, The City of God, he figures that he has a divine opinion about just about every topic that he covers. So just something to think about. From the time the Bible became considered authoritative by the populace, the book was used as a tool for authorities to claim themselves and their systems to be divinely decreed by God. And they would use the bait and switch method to give lip service to the Bible and then ignore its teachings. And I wonder if we got Calvin here. Oh, we don't have Calvin here. Okay, anyway. Here's Justinian. He made Juris Corpus. Let's see, what is it called? Corpus Juris Civilius, based basically on Augustine's thoughts. Okay, and it's been used for governments since that time. And the Westminster Confession, it's been used to determine whether people are Christians or not. And it has a lot of, it was developed during the English Civil War, so they could use it to dispose of enemies of their religion, their system. And it's the antithesis of the Magna Carta. Authoritarians present themselves as middlemen between the Bible and people. They claim the Bible from their subjects to control. They keep the Bible from their subjects to control the narrative. During this time, they establish law systems that enforce their rule while saving themselves from having the Bible or the law system hold them accountable for their actions and judgments. And that's what the Westminster parliamentary system, you can't hold like the king or the people in power responsible for any criminal acts that they do. That's what they do. Here's the Corpus Juris Civilius. It was written in 527, and it's been used even up to today. It says 1998 on this thing. But yeah, in some law systems. And it's a basis of some law systems that we have. An example of this is the Westminster parliamentary and court system used by countries of the English Commonwealth. And Justinian the Great revised, and also Justinian the Great revised the Roman law to create the Corpus Juris Civilius, a court of laws based on Augustine of Hippo's theology, a mixture of Greek, Zoroastrian, Gnostics, and Christian thought. And Christian interpretations of the Eden narrative have been stuck in their Greek and Persian notions for almost 2 millennia, since Augustine mostly. In an attempt to understand the narrative, theologians use the assumptions based on Greek and Persian culture, which differs from ancient Hebrew culture. Inconsistencies in these Christian interpretations based on foreign biblical cultures occurs when the premises of truth are used to question these narratives. So you can use truth to question the narratives and find out if what they're presenting is true. What are the premises of truth? It's being consistent. It's being omnipresent, which means everywhere, and it means eternal, which means throughout all ages. Okay, and so the Bible consists of several books compiled over the centuries, but the same message continues. The Bible is a book of the same God having a relationship with people using principles he has established from the first pages written to the last pages given. Interpretations of Scripture should be judged based on consistency of the character of God and the message of the gospel throughout the books of the Bible. Interpretations fail when God, his method of salvation, and his character are considered to change throughout the Bible. And there are different people that preach that. Jesus teaches that his character and the Father's character are the same. Know Jesus and you will know the Father. Therefore, the Christian God's character is deemed consistent with all the persons of the Trinity. And here's a picture of Christ being baptized. And it's supposed to be John the Baptist. And here's the Father. There's the Spirit. And Jesus. So you have the Trinity, Father, Spirit, and Son. Okay. in the first chapters of the book, Genesis, the choice man must make in deciding his future is established. So that's what's going on. It's that he makes a choice. Is he to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of life? So he has to choose between the two, really. And they're in the middle of the garden. Some understand the trees as literal, as, what have we got here? As they do for all things in the narratives of Adam's fall. Logically, a literal interpretation of this narrative denies what a physical tree is. So a literal understanding of these trees is impossible. For the Hebrew word describing the serpent also, it goes beyond the literal interpretation of being a snake. The word serpent is sometimes merged with the word God. It goes El-Nahesh to describe the character in the narrative. El is God and Nahesh is the serpent. Other contextual phrases enlighten the reader to an understanding not in line with a literal interpretation. For Satan himself masquerades as the angel of light. So, giving good interpretations and trying to help people. Okay. Some people state that the Bible in all places is to be understood literally. To avoid sounding crazy to others, these people redefine the term literal to mean that stories in the Bible need to be understood in context to the message, the writer's message and style. And this is the proper manner to understand the Bible, is to understand it according to the language being used and the message and so forth, not to take everything literally. Stating the Bible is to be understood in a literal manner places absurd restrictions on it. To define literal to mean another meaning in a bid to excuse ludicrous and gaslighting statements, which create cognitive dissonance, is to become immersed in Orwellian doublespeak. So these people that are saying that the Bible is literal are basically involved with Orwellian doublespeak, whether they realize it or not. When you redefine words to mean other things than what they really mean, you're doing doublespeak. Redefining words is common for schools of philosophy and religion when indoctrinating their students. Yet, they use resources that conflict with their teachings. They must redefine words to fit their teachings. They are so myopic and focused on their dogma and interpretations that they cannot conceive the writer's message. When people assume they know, they do not question their presumptions, for they do not recognize them as presumptions. This is why you have to use truth to question everything. Find out if it's consistent. And many of these people teach here a little, there a little, as they knit a patchwork. And so they kind of chop up sentences and rework them so that they can say what they want to be said. It's like cutting up somebody's message and then making your own message in place of that. That's what, blackmailers do and stuff like that. Anyway, they cut up magazines and then make a message out of it. And these are what sometimes schools of philosophy, theology, and other schools do when they're trying to project their idea and indoctrinate rather than teach. It would be better not to use the term literal if it must be redefined. This does not mean that the Adam narrative is a fiction. Do not say it's literal. However, the story has a narrative intended to expand to encompass every person's story. This is totally different from what you're going to hear. The narrative is to encompass every person's story in dealing with God. And this is lost with many interpretations in the foreign biblical accounts. Adam becomes a mythical person in these interpretations beyond the experience of the rest of humanity. However, the real intention of the story is to state the experience of every person who ever lived, is living, and will live. Because it's all about how they deal with God and how they make a choice. And that's what that story is about. And most of us do the things that Adam does, and we don't come out of that because we don't even understand what is going on in this narrative. Okay, and I'll be getting to that. At the end, I will tell you what it is actually about, the two trees. And it's obvious in the story. There's lots of words that say sentences, the idea of the story in there. When I tell you about what it means, you can just read it, look at it, and see, oh yeah, it says that, and it says that, and it says that. It's really covering that. Yeah. Or you can deny everything, I suppose. Biblical scholars and theologians have offered various interpretations of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The following are some interpretations. Philosophy has recently used Merism to interpret the tree of good and evil. Okay, and this is what Merism is. Okay, Merism is when it's a figure of speech where you take two extremes and describe them to be a comprehensive concept which implies everything in between. This literal device is used to convey a sense of totality and completeness. In the Bible, the term heaven and earth is assumed to encompass the creation of the universe. So everything. It's not just heaven and earth, it's everything within heaven and earth. It's the universe. It's the idea. This term, heaven and earth, is considered as a merism. Some have used the tree of good and evil in the same merism manner. This meristic view interprets the phrase, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as a literary device where two extremes, good and evil, are named to encompass everything in between. This means that the tree represents the entire spectrum of human experience, including moral choices and consequences. Awareness of one's existence and consciousness could be considered the whole spectrum of human existence. You know, like, I am aware, therefore I am. René Descartes. This means that good and evil does not refer to two separate things, but rather represents a comprehensive understanding of moral discernment and encompassing all aspects of human judgment and decision-making. This merism interpretation suggests that the tree represents the capacity to evaluate moral situations, choose right and wrong, and understand the distinction between good and evil. It is not simply a matter of knowing abstract concepts, but the practical ability to apply moral wisdom in everyday life. So you look at a situation and you can make a moral judgment. In an attempt to justify their arguments, the scholars attempt to make parallels in biblical wisdom literature to this tree, such as Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And Hebrews 5:24-14, solid food is for the mature, who because of practice have their sense trained to discern good and evil. So these passages emphasize the importance of moral discernment and the development of wisdom through experience and practice. In conclusion, the Merism interpretation of the tree of knowledge of good and evil emphasizes its role as a symbol of moral discernment and practical wisdom, encompassing the ability to evaluate and choose between good and evil. While other interpretations exist, this understanding highlights the tree's significance as representing humanity's capacity to develop an evolving philosophy for directing decision-making. So it's where man can figure out how to make moral judgments. And that's what the tree's about. And some people say, well, if you can do that, man can do that. He doesn't need God to do that because that's redundant, because man's already doing it. He's making already his moral choices. He doesn't need God. So you get that coming out of this. And Hume was very much into the experience to make your moral judgments. David Hume. And, experience and practice may develop an understanding of relationships, but does this mean that a person can only use personal experience to build their concepts of morality? If you do that, if you just rely on your own personal experiences, basically this will happen. This ideology leads to the denial of historical testimony as relevant because you haven't experienced it. So it's a way of denying other people's testimony, and especially historical testimony or other people's testimony. It's you have your truth. Others argue that the tree represents omniscience, the ability to know everything, including secrets and mysteries. Other purposes of that, it symbolizes the beginning of human autonomy and moral agency, with Adam and Eve exercising their judgment and choice. So this is a picture of a Gnostic with Sophia and Demiurge. And what's going on here is they believe that the people will be given mysteries and secrets. Sophia, she goes out and gives mysteries and secrets to people so they can understand the universe. And this is what I'm trying to convey in this picture. So, because that's the way the Gnostics think. They can get mysteries, then they are the enlightened above the other people. Okay. The idea that the tree represents omniscience is a claim to be a god, which the serpent offers. But, and here's a picture of what the serpent could have looked like. An angel serpent. Because it's talking about being sly and crafty and beautiful and godlike. Many things involved with that word that they're using, especially because they add like El-Nahish, God serpent. That could mean more like a chaos god too, really, because the serpent was a chaos monster in medieval or in ancient times. Anyway, I won't go into that. The belief that only the tree gives the ability of human autonomy and moral agency is a denial of Adam's choice to eat of the tree. Eating demonstrates that he already had the ability to make ethical choices. The tree was not giving abilities because he already had the ability. It was offering choices. That's what it was really doing. But this other interpretations think that it gave ability. And this is something that a person like Jordan Peterson or Carl Jung would be interpreting the tree of knowledge, good and evil. It's the way of becoming conscious. And this is what Jordan Peterson preaches, is that when they ate the tree, if you listen to his Genesis talks, that people became conscious of reality and they could kind of make patterns with it. Even though there's chaos underneath, they could see the patterns above it and they became aware and they can make choices. This is what Jordan Peterson preaches, similar to the idea of Merism, which is what happens when you eat of the tree. That's not what the Bible teaches, but that's the philosophy of what is going on. Then there's also the allegory. Some Christian traditions view the tree of knowledge as an allegory for humanity's tendency to seek self-knowledge and autonomy rather than relying on God's guidance. This interpretation emphasizes the consequences of disobedience and the need for redemption through faith in something. The allegory depends on a similar understanding of God, humanity, and redemption as the obedient interpretation. And then there's the discernment interpretation. Others argue that the tree symbolizes the ability to discern between good and evil rather than possessing explicit moral knowledge. This interpretation emphasizes the importance of the human perspective in justifying choices, which I think can lead to a problem. But this is what court systems are based on when they use precedent. They say that a person can make these choices, and now we're going to use those choices, and we justify those choices through the court system. That's basically what's going on with this discernment ability. You have judges saying they can make the moral choices because they can discern between good and evil. Okay. And this is a common understanding, though people may not have heard of this interpretation of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So this idea of discernment, what good and evil is a very common understanding. In truth, focusing totally on the human perspective evolves to state, I have my truth and you have yours. So here's a guy writing a book, My Truth. And it's the big thing. And here he's in prison too, which is interesting. Or just getting out of prison or school or something. I have my truth and you have yours. This philosophy, actually, when you have that philosophy, you break your relationships with other people because you have your truth, they have theirs. And if they don't have the same truth, then you fracture relationships and all your relationships. And by extension, you fracture society. It's basically diversity is the failure of everything. You can't have everybody having their own truth. You have to find out what truth is, search for it, and agree that truth is consistent, omnipresent, and eternal. Then you can come to some kind of understanding that you can agree on, rather than separate understandings that you disagree on everything. In contrast, stark contrast, in the Bible narrative, God is concerned about mankind acting as gods. That's what's going on in the narrative in Genesis. Because that's what it's about. Even the Al-Nahish says, you will be like God if you eat of this tree. So what does that mean? It means that what are the qualities of a God? And it's not about, like you could have it saying that it was to know the difference between good and evil. Does that make you a God? No. It doesn't make, if you know what is evil and what is good, it doesn't really make you a God. So knowing good and evil, or getting your consciousness, even though you already had that, doesn't make you a God. Being aware, therefore you are, doesn't make you a God. But this is what a God is. Gods use their authority and abilities to dictate the order of their reign or kingdom. That's what gods do. And if you had Neptune, he's a god, and so his reign is over the oceans. And so people, when they considered Neptune as their god, if they're in the ocean like a sailor, they would pray to Neptune for clear skies or ability to get to the place without going through a big storm and so forth, because that would be his reign. His reign is over the ocean. So that's what, if you have a personal God, if you think you are a God, then you try to make your reign over others. Therefore, they have to accept your truth. And if they don't accept your truth, then they are they should be disciplined, because you have claimed control over them when you want them to accept your truth. So many people in today's world claim that they are gods. They claim their truth, and those they encounter must conform to their truth. Okay? So this person would want you to conform to the belief that this guy is a girl, because that's the truth that he wants to say, that he is. So he's claiming to be a god, and he wants you to be in his domain. And so he will claim that you must acknowledge that he is a woman, because that's his truth. And the court systems, they agree with this because basically they make claims similar in manners, because they make a statement that they made a judgment, and they say that people must accept their judgment, not necessarily based on what is, right or wrong, but what they consider to be right or wrong. So you just have to accept their judgment. And it's the same as a trans person saying, you must accept what I say I am, because you are under my dominion. I am God here. Same idea. And the judges support this because they are birds of a feather with the same philosophy flocked together. Okay. So, Merism and Omniscience interpretations consider the tree a blessing, actually, furthering humanity's development. So the tree itself is good, according to like Carl Jung and Jordan Peterson, and probably Martin Heidegger, who Jordan Peterson concurs and thinks along with. Okay. They believe that eating the tree is a blessing for mankind. They believe it gives consciousness and awareness. However, the obedience and Allegory consider eating from the tree disruptive to God's authority. So in contrast, this awareness is not appreciated by those who believe in obedience and the Allegory interpretation. They see it as an affront to God's authority. Let's see here. Well, here's Jordan Peterson. One of the interpretations of the tree of knowledge, all of these interpretations of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, is considered to have good qualities. They all do. They all figure they're good qualities it actually gives. Only in the Allegory interpretation is the tree believed to be about humanity's attempt to be autonomous of God. And of course, in the obedience, it's being just disobedient of God, trying to break the authority. But the tree itself is good. It's just the act of being disobedient is the problem. But this begs the question, is it wrong to not recognize God? If a person finds another distasteful, should they not have the right to not associate with that person, whether he is God or not? So if somebody finds that God is a tyrant and awful and controlling, shouldn't one have the right to say, I don't want to have to deal with this person? If that's according to the allegory and the obedience interpretation of the tree of knowledge, isn't it okay? I would think it's okay. That's because I don't agree with those interpretations. I don't think that's what it's about. It's not about obedience. The tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge is not about a good thing, as far as I'm concerned. It's not about getting consciousness. People had consciousness already. They had the consciousness and they were able to decide already. The tree didn't offer any of that. It offered something else. It offered to become a god. And a god makes his truth. And he makes his truth reign over his domain. Okay. So with these other ones, in the obedience interpretation, it would go like this. And obedience interpretation is the standard interpretation used by Christians. And in obedience interpretation, well, this tree is worthy of death, but we don't know why it's worthy of death. Everybody thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But anyway, in the obedience interpretation, this is the standard definition, interpretation used by the Christian church, which is based on Augustine, who is, I consider, a heretic. Okay. It does not consider the tree a problem. Instead, it states that humanity has upset God's hierarchical authority by eating of the tree. The tree tests obedience to God's authority. This highlights the distinction between God's hierarchical order and chaotic human autonomy. This interpretation has presumptions that conflict with biblical teaching of God and man. So its presumptions, I think, are in conflict with the Bible, though Christianity teaches this in all their seminaries. Doesn't matter you're Catholic, Protestant, or probably even a Mormon. It teaches this. Okay, so this interpretation's presumptions conflict with biblical teachings of God and man. Theologians, using the obedience doctrine, redefine words, project their theology onto Scripture. They also make insane statements and claims, and have cognitive dissonance. Nothing in the obedience interpretation states that one tree is okay and the other tree bad, except God's warning. That's the only thing that is the problem, is God warns not to eat of this tree. But it doesn't say the tree's bad. Both trees look and taste good, neither being inherently wrong or evil. God placed a salesperson in the tree of knowledge of good and evil and told mankind not to touch, setting up his trap to demonstrate man's failure to follow orders, the covenant of works, which they term this, and perfect obedience, to do this. Then God left, waiting for his moment to return to say, "Caught you." Theologians state mankind's inability to follow orders creates a vast gap between God and mankind. So it's basically, here's slaves. this idea of obedience, we have to be slaves. And here's being entrapped, police are entrapping people, setting up a sting. And that's what it seems to be what God did. In obedience interpretation drama, God put 2 trees in the Eden and used them to condemn mankind. Later, God would show how generous he is by providing his method of unilaterally justifying those he considers his favorites. This is regarded as his method for redeeming mankind. So, as Aesop would say, moral lesson was, this would be the lesson that is taught in Genesis according to Aesop, tradition of obedience interpretation. Do not trust anyone in authority. They will just set you up for condemnation. That's basically the moral of the story according to an Aesop's fable of what's going on in the Genesis narrative according to the obedience interpretation, which is the interpretation that all Christian churches use in understanding what happened in the garden. According to the obedience interpretation narrative for redemption, God makes a unilateral deal with one of his personalities to demonstrate his ability to obey orders even when obedience results in torture and death. This Jesus shows off his perfect obedience. This personality of God then can declare, I am so much greater than the rabble of mankind. My superior abilities in everything make me able to make any arbitrary judgment I want. When Jesus gets the authority he deserves from the Father, according to this story, he will reign as Lord over all, kings and kingdom. He'll be King of kings and Lord of lords. Every knee shall bow to the tyrant who programs all and gives little kingdoms to his favorites. And all the redeemed can at any time watch the torture of all those who did not believe. They can do this for their amusement, because they're supposed to be burning in hell forever and ever. Okay. And they will deny this statement. Okay. Where am I here? Oh, what a glorious day that will be. Hallelujah. Very facetious and sarcastic there. Did God lose his position of authority because of Adam's sin? Does God predestine all things? Did God create the fall of mankind by entrapping Adam to prove his superiority over Adam? Does God unilaterally decide for mankind's fate? Are we supposed to be robots? People are considered by theologians pursuing this theology as only objects to be programmed as machines. They will deny this statement when presented bluntly, like I do. Another issue is what kind of redemption is offered using this narrative. Is this redemption justifiable, or is it arbitrarily fickle? Okay. Does it involve, is it just some court just making decisions about objects, you and me, without us really doing anything and being involved? Is that what it is about? This narrative's redemption involves mankind as a passive object. Other parties, such as Jesus and the Father or Jesus and Satan, do all the work and decision-making. This God continues to push his tyranny by declaring, I choose whom I will predestine for heaven and hell. Mankind are just objects of my kingdom to do whatever I want. My decisions are between me, myself, and I. You people must accept my declarations because I am God. All things are for my self-praise and glory. though God's judgments are contradictory, insane, prejudicial, and often cruel and unusual. Punishment. Okay. The followers of this God believe that they are of the same character and essence of this God, as their God. They are filled with this Spirit's breath. They have received personal experiences or divine revelation, which gives them omniscience, which is close to the another one like Gnosticism, because they're Gnostics. They are elite, entitled, and enlightened. The followers of this God delights in the abuse of others. The power to abuse others justifies and declares who they are to the glory of their God and his might. But the gospel message, God worries about how people treat one another. He wants people to divorce themselves from abusive relationships in their mind, not necessarily, to overcome. They have to quit abusing other people, in other words, and make a humble confession that asks for forgiveness for the abuse they do to others, and a renewed heart desiring to love God and others. Christ considers the abuse of others as a sin. This theme is in Matthew 25:31 to 46. You can go there and read that. Basically, it says if you help the people in need, then you are going to be with God. And if you don't help people in need, and just you're not going to be with God. That's basically what it says. Christ on the cross is the objective visualization of the pain and anguish God suffers when we abuse others, because the same kind of abuse that we do to others is the abuse that Christ received at the cross from others, not from God, from others. When the repentant, that's why our sins are placed upon him. That's what it means. When the repentant confesses and asks Christ for forgiveness for their sins against others that they've done, which is an offense against God, Christ forgives them for this offense against him and gives the promise to ask for. And I'm pretty sure even, the Gnostics will agree that this is true, who claim themselves are Christians. Even Calvinists will agree with this. But they just deny it has any importance, maybe. I don't know. I think that's the gospel message. It's everything, but they don't see that as the gospel message. Okay, so this gospel message is in Eden. The two trees represent a choice to believers, to believe the world revolves around the individual, or do we define the individual who defines their truth, justifies themselves, and fantasizes about their reality or system? Or the choice to eat of the tree of life. The tree of life is to eat in the way of truth and the life of Christ offers. And it is to understand that others have the right to make their decisions, take responsibility, search for truth, and honor words spoken. It is to enter a community where a person's heart is renewed to care for others, knowing they are valuable and vital in the community of like believers. Excuse me. So here we have the tree of knowledge, and if you look, when you eat of this tree, you are offered death. There are lies given, promises that are false by the serpent, and they tend to want to become a god and narcissistic and think about themselves. They fantasize about who they are, and they make it a system, and they do obedience to that. And part of their system is to cover themselves up, to make themselves look okay with fig leaves. And fig leaves are symbolic of trying to make a deception, a system, and it doesn't really cover it, but fig leaves don't really cover you properly. And it's basically a deception, but it's a system to kind of hoodwink other people. Now, this is so you become obedient to this system that is actually trying to hoodwink you. And if you get caught, you blame the other person, and you also hide from being judged, hiding in knowledge of the other trees. And you should try to feel entitled. You have entitlement. And you try to do self-help, which is also part of the fig leaves. And you're anxious and fearful when you're actually getting judged. You feel pretty fearful. And the tree of life it offers life. It offers truth. It offers God's love according to 1 Corinthians 13. It offers reality. And it's an allegiance to a person, not an allegiance to a system which enslaves, but an allegiance to a person who you have a relationship with. It offers forgiveness instead of blaming, and it offers commitment instead of cowardice and hiding from problems. You are committed and you work through the problem. You are thankful instead of entitled, and you're asking for help from others. Not doing self-help. And you trust in God that he cares for you, and you have peace because of that, because he offers that peace. So to me, the choice is clear. You make a choice between the tree of your own truth or the tree of life, which is real truth. Okay? So this is, and God and Adam had that same situation. He had to make a decision. He already had the ability. He already was aware. He already could do things. He just had to make a choice. And he made the choice of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, eating from the tree of my own truth. And sometimes even with the knowledge, it can be interpreted in different parts as kind of like being manipulative knowledge. You can manipulate good and evil. That's more what it's kind of about. Some of they use different words even throughout the story that changes the meaning just a little bit. And so if you know the Hebrew, it's not exactly the same word they use all the time with the tree of good and evil. They just, they add a little bit here, add a little bit there, and it just changes a little bit. And one of them is the idea of manipulating good and evil. So you can manipulate it so that you can make yourself look good and others look evil. Things like that. So anyway, think about what I just talked about. It's quite a long talk. This is an interpretation you won't hear, but if you actually look at the Bible and read what's going on in the story, you will see what's going on and understand this. You will see this if you actually open your eyes and pray about it. And it's about making a decision for life or for death. Just like Joshua said, I'm going to follow my God for life. May God bless you. May he give his peace to you. May you ask for wisdom, and may he be with you all the days of your life. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.